Welcome to our continuing series of virtual voices. Today, we have two experts from Ukraine. They are going to be talking about the current situation in Ukraine following the Russian attack on Ukraine. We have Kateryna Pavlova, who works for the State Agency of Ukraine of Exclusion Zone Management, as the head of the Department for International Cooperation and Public Relations. Also, she serves as the acting head of the State Agency for the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone Management, and she will be talking about the current fires that have started by the Russians. As an appointed chief of staff for combating the Chernobyl fire, she was the one that stopped the fire 2 years ago. She coordinates G7 and the IAEA projects related to decommissioning the nuclear reactors and radioactive waste management at Chernobyl. She also participates in the G7 working group against the spread of weapons of mass destruction and physical security. We also have Mr. Mykola Volkivskyi, who is the former advisor to the chairman of the Committee of the Ukrainian Parliament. He's a political expert and alumnus of the New Security Leaders Program, organized by the Kazimierz Pulaski Foundation, the German Marshall Plan of the United States, and he is the president of the first International Ukrainian Foundation of Delegation. Over to you, Kateryna.
Dear colleagues, dear Dr. Durbak, thank you so much for this opportunity to have a webinar and to share information regarding the military activity from Russia Federation in Ukraine, and how all world knowing now that Russia Federation is calling like a state nuclear terrorist. So I would like to share with you my presentation. 24 February, exclusion zone was occupied by Russian military from the side of Belarus. They just came by big amount of militaries, and they catch atomic station, nuclear power plant, and they kidnap the personnel staff who is working on our facilities, and they also shut down our radiation monitoring system. I just want to remind all the world the consequences of radiation and Chernobyl explosion in 1986. Next slide, please. During these 35 years, all international society and Ukraine working hard to organize all our threats and to fight against the threats and build unique objects to save radioactive waste and manage the nuclear power plant. Next slide, please. In good day, the exclusion zone and nuclear power plant look like this. Next slide, please. This is a map of contamination with high level of transuranium elements, and you can see that it's just 150 kilometers from Kiev. Next slide. I want to remind all the world and Europe that Ukraine take a second place in Europe and fourth in the world for amount of radioactive waste, 3.5 million cubic meter of radioactive waste. Next slide, please. This is just a picture, terrible picture, how Russian occupied our territory in exclusion zone and how they broken everything in exclusion zone. What is all our objects and all our facilities is bombing and destroyed by Russian during all this last more than 1 month. Next slide, please. In that slide, I just managed the facilities, name of facilities, which is now occupied by Russian. You can see the number of facilities, which is, some of them is really strategic facilities. And for example, new safe confinement shelter object is very, very important object for all the world, because under the new safe confinement, it is very dangerous substance with transuranium elements in the unit number 4. Next slide, please. Here you can see the map with monitoring system arms of exclusion zone. This system, Russia was shut down the 25th of February. And from that time, we have no exactly data about radiation level in exclusion zone. And especially during now, when already more than 10 days, big firing is going all over exclusion zone. Next, please. Here is potential Chernobyl risk. I won't just move forward to next slide number 13, please. With firing. Yes, here's a map and here's a picture from NASA, where we can see the some points, red points, it's managing the amount of firing for last 10 days. More than 30 times we had the firing, which it's taken more than 10,000 square kilometers. So the firing is really, really big threats right now. And if we compare with 2020, when I was head of agency, I just want to mention that in that time, we actually make a lot of activities from January 2020. We cultivate a big amount of territory around exclusion zone and inside of exclusion zone. We also fill it up the swimming pools for water keeping all over exclusion zone to have extra water for fire workers to fight against the fire. So exclusion zone every year provides some special activities to be prepared for the springtime, to be ready fight against the fire. What did not happen this year? This year, because of occupation, we have no staff there in exclusion zone inside who is available and who is ready to fight against fire. We have no infrastructure for this activity, and we really now in big threats, and depends of course winds and depends of weather condition, but we can see in right side that weather conditions show that big amount of radionuclides probably can move into the Europe. So why I show it also before in slide number 9, the monitoring system, arms monitoring system, because when this monitoring system is working, we can have exactly data about doses and about what its level of doses in which area it's moving inside in exclusion zone during the fire's time. All these points is working 24/7, and in time of firing, they update data every 2 minutes. So right now we can see from the space that we have a lot of firing points, and it is actually just look like it's not big area, but believe me, this is big area in reality. And we have no data about the level of radiation. So I won't mention that Russian soldiers and Russian military, they not provide and not following the rules inside an exclusion zone. So biggest part of firing is coming all the time from anthropogenic impact. So we can consider that all this firing is because of some activity of military of Russian Federation. And next slide, please. I want just also mention that inside an exclusion zone, we have big problem with electricity supply. We just connect Chernobyl nuclear power plant to the mother line, and all rest of facilities inside the 10-kilometer zone and 30-kilometer zone is without electricity. So to provide any activity to fight against fire is impossible right now. And all our staff from fire emergency service is outside of exclusion zone. So we consider it the fact that it will grow and grow because weather condition will be really very, how to say, very used for fire season. And we have no rain, we have big wind, and we can see, and I know from my experience from 2020, that in that time it were big threats also to territory of Belarus, because we have big measures, border measures with Belarus side, and we have big amount of forest connection. So probably this big fire can also cross the border to Belarus side. Thank you so much for attention. And if you want some comments or if you have some question, I'm ready to answer. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Kateryna, for a very, very, how should I put it, sad presentation. It is just terrible that after working so hard for so many years to make Chernobyl and the exclusion zone safe and provide not only a new Eden for animals and plants, that all of that is being destroyed by the current Russian aggression. We will move now to Mr. Mykola Volkivskyi, and then we will move to questions from our audience. Mr. Volkivskyi, over to you.
Yes, I just want to remind you, hello everybody, I'm glad to be welcome to this World Information Transfer conference. I would like to say that it's true, because it was a big problem. We tried to, with Kateryna, to show the whole world just 1 month before the war officially started in January, that can be the catastrophe, the even worse than 15 Chernobyl. This can destroy the whole continent. It's why the Russian troops, they tried, to enter Ukraine in even Chernobyl exclusion zone through checkpoint and border check from Vilcha. Now we have we see there's a rolling of the weapon, of the missiles, and something they rolling, they entered Ukraine from the Belarus-Polish border from this checkpoint. It's just, to continue this kind of problems, because other ways we receive it from the from investigational or some secret services as Russians. Also they want to enter the Yuzhno-Ukrainsk NPP, and also they interested to rolling from this weapon to doing something in the Varash, in Kuznetsovsk, and even in this Riven region. But obviously, for Ukrainians and from Ukrainian delegation during the peace talks, because if we like to proceed, this kind of peaceful negotiations and peace talks between Ukraine and Russia, it was big mistake for Ukrainian side to accept the place with these negotiations provided, because for me it was a big mistake to provide this conference in Belarus, because it's a big problem, because nobody. Even all democratic world, nobody respected Lukashenko as legitimate as a president of a democratic country as Belarus, because since August 2020, He's after the elections, it started the new era of democratic Belarus, and now all the time I am mentioning it was this first round of these negotiations in Belarus. It was big mistake from Ukrainian side. Now we have the new implementation of these bilateral talks, and the place when we provided these negotiations in Turkey. Why? Because even Erdogan, he proposed this place, to provide this peaceful talks like since October 31st of October in Bishkek in Kyrgyzstan. He proposed to be a moderator of this bilateral talks between our two countries. Everybody should understand now is we cannot mention it any peaceful treatment plans between two countries because everybody need to understand that Ukrainian need to be the all countries with all independence territory, what we have it like since 24th of August 1991 since our independence. But some of the Russians delegation all the time they mention it, they cannot prove that the Crimea is a part of Ukraine, of like the Donetsk and Lugansk republics, like this independence part of like the independent republic. But we need to understand, first of all, everybody needs to remind that Ukraine, it's a peaceful country with all territories, including Crimea, Donetsk, and Lugansk. Unfortunately, some of European leaders sometimes they just trying to sell Ukrainian interests, and they try to be more close to Moscow than Brussels. I mean, like if you will try to mention, for example, Hungary, what we expected, what we observing from the last month when the war officially started since February 24th of February. Because Hungary was just one of the country which have the common border between Ukraine and European Union, and the Ukrainians who decided to flee to these countries like refugees, they was accepted by the Hungary, but just by the the civil society or non-governmental organizations, because on the level of state, it wasn't accepted the Ukrainian refugees by the government. If you would like to compare with Poland, they trying to do everything for Ukrainians. Even they changing law, immigration law. They tried to give some social payments for Ukrainians, but Hungary, that's still in the time. They just trying to use Ukrainian topic as an element of political campaign, because on this Sunday it will be the parliamentary elections in Hungary, and the current Prime Minister Viktor Orban, he's like on the middle between the Brussels and Moscow, and even the Minister of Foreign Affairs Petr Sijarto, sometimes he tried to be like between Ukraine and European Union. I just like to try to remind you that the Hungary accept the Gazprom agreement in October. It's mentioned that Ukrainian, to the Hungarian government tried to negotiate with some oligarchs from the Russia side. But what we have now, we had fifth or sixth these round tables of the negotiations between Ukraine and Russia, but they just tried, to proceed by talking. We don't have actually no documents. Some of the members of the delegation, as chief of Servant of the People political party, David Arhami, as they propose some peaceful agreement, the three agreements for how to mention and how to stop the war with Russia. But we know it's some of the issue like the Crimea. They propose, to have some negotiations about Crimea for the next 15 years. In Crimea, it will be like from the Russian side, it'll be the federal member, like be the part of Russia. For me, it's my opinion, it's a big mistake from the Ukrainian delegation. We cannot accept any of these agreements which Russia side has proposed for us. Some of the Russian delegation also say that they can prove or verify that Ukraine can be the member of European Union, but I hope it's gonna be in next nearly future, but we don't know actually if some of the leaders, as Viktor Orban, will be in the European Union countries, it will be difficult even for us, to in the future to be a real member of the European Union. I just also try to remind that even Emmanuel Macron is the president of France. They try to use also Ukrainian situation and Ukrainian war as an element of his political campaign, because in 11th of April, it's also will be the presidential elections in France. When Macron officially visited Moscow on 7th of February, and after he visited Kiev on 8th of February, he just showed from the whole world the more interested, to have the negotiations with Vladimir Putin than with Volodymyr Zelensky. Everybody's to understand why the keep silent, why the Olaf Scholz, the Chancellor of Germany, he tried to keep silence for the last period just before the war, because he was also interested, to cooperate with Russia. It's to have the common business with on the level of government. And also the Gerhard Schröder, former Chancellor of Germany, he was on, if I'm not wrong, he was one of the advisors of Gazprom, but he's the former leader of political party which represent Olaf Scholz. But now we Ukrainian delegation, they because this second term of negotiations between Ukraine and Russia is more important for every country. I mean, like, for more important for democratic world, because if it's like based in Turkey, because Turkey, it's a member of NATO, and also the Erdogan, he's much more closer to Ukraine than everybody's understanding Lukashenko. But all the time, when is this some peaceful talks or peaceful dialogues provided by Russia in Minsk, for example, it can be the disaster from every democratic countries of the world. Because I just try to remind you that Nagorno-Karabakh, it's this territory of peaceful agreements and treaty talks was provided also in Minsk. Now though it's 3 days ago, the Minister of Defense and Army of Azerbaijan officially entered to Nagorno-Karabakh, because some of the soldiers was like to provide the peaceful operation in Russia. They now in Ukraine. Now it's the same situation in Ossetia, in the same situation in Abkhazia. All of the army of Abkhazia, they fight against Ukraine in Ukraine. It's a big problem for all of these countries. But I also used to talk with some Georgian politicians last few days, and they said that even it's not even then the Russian army officially left Abkhazia, it's not it's a big problem for new government of Georgia. I mean, like the Sulame Zarabishvili, the president of Georgia, she's like also like on the middle between democratic world and Russia. It's my point of view, but I hope the next few weeks it also will be some treatments talks or something, but it will be just on the level of negotiations. But we cannot see in even in the nearly future some of the official agreements between Ukrainian and Russian delegation, because all of democratic world, they recognize, they understand that Putin is an aggressor. It's Russia officially entered Ukraine. It's not the special military operation all the time mentioned by Russian TV and Russian Federation in the governmental TV, because it's so all of this is provided in fakes and something, and everybody anyone can see that a demilitarization in my country or denazification, because how it's maybe possible to make the denazification in my country when Russia tried to attack the TV satellite in near Babi Yar, and also they attacked this Babi Yar memorial, which was so important for all of Jews, because 75 years ago, it's place when all of there's a lot of Ukrainian Jews was killed in this place. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Volkivskyi, for a brief definition of history and for telling us our current situation. And now we will turn for the questions. Jessica Williamson, who is our Regional Director of United States. Jessica?
Good morning. Thank you, Dr. Durbach, and thank you, Mykola and Kateryna, for updating us on this important and deteriorating situation. Our first question is, what will be the area of catastrophe if an explosion at the Ukrainian nuclear power plant takes place, and what countries will be at risk?
I will try to explain that we cannot account the consequences of any nuclear explosion because it depends of many factors and depends what we now, or we're talking about biggest nuclear power plant in Europe, Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, or we talk now about Chernobyl nuclear power plant. So it depends of many factors, but consequences and area which it will actually polluted or which it will be somehow touched. It's impossible to prevent, it's impossible to account. We know all about 1986 that so many countries from Europe and even from other continents were actually polluted with transuranium elements and radiation. So here it's, but it can be big catastrophe because we should also account on that Zaporizhzhia atomic station. It's 6 nuclear power plants with 1,000 megawatt capacity of power. So it is very, very, it can be 20 Chernobyls in case of explosion or some other emergency in this facility. If we talk about Chernobyl, we have big amount of very high level materials there, and especially inside the arch, new safe confinement. And the new safe confinement is unique object, and no, it's not big amount of professional staff can operate these objects. So any mistake can bring the big disaster. And under the arch, under the new safe confinement, is located unit number 4, which is totally destroyed. And the old sarcophagus is already also destroyed almost. So in any case of explosion there, it will be really, really big disaster, and especially also for Russia and Belarus side.
Thank you. Our next question is, I've heard thoughts about the need for UN peacekeepers on Chernobyl territory. How could it help, and is it even possible?
I want to mention that today we have, yesterday and today we have big date because Director General of IAEA is visiting Ukraine, Mr. Grossi. And this is really very good sign, I think, because such a high level of representatives of IAEA visiting Ukraine with very high level staff. He take with him, he bring with him very high level staff, and they visiting Ukraine, visiting Yuzhno-Ukrainska nuclear power plant, which is actually very close to border with Donetsk. So he is a really strong one who is decide to visit territory where really can be big threats, especially for his life as well. But it's very significant and very important visit. And I can't anything now, give any information by now. We're waiting for official statement from regulator body of Ukraine and from IAEA side. But I do believe that we should actually have support from IAEA in case when Russia will move out from exclusion zone, how we will take back all our facilities, in which condition, and who will make the safeguard assistant and mission to provide the safety, security, and accounting of consequences by occupation by this territory. So we have some information all over that Russian troops is moving out, but I'm not so positive about it. And I'm so afraid that they're moving out because they want to use some threats for our country. For example, chemical weapon, how they done in Syria. For example, nuclear weapon. And I won't be positive and hope that this is the result of negotiation from Turkey, but I also worried about this moment.
Thank you. Our next question is, if the terrorists completely disrupt the nuclear power plant, how fast will the radiation spread? It depends of many conditions and depends of which part and how it will destroy it and what it will, which case will be of emergency. One time I mentioned, but radiation have no border, radiation have no time. For example, transuranium elements, lifetime is 24,000 years. So it can spread very fast and it will go not so fast. So this is my actually answer.
Yes.
Thank you. Our next question is there any data on the nuclear power plant employees? Are they still alive?
Employees in exclusion zone in nuclear power plant, we exchanged the staff 2 weeks ago. Staff which were kidnapped from 24th of February, which were on station during almost 4 weeks. We exchanged the staff 2 weeks ago for new team, and it looks like it's no actually threats for them life now. About Zaporizhzhia station, there are really serious situation, and there is located not just Russian military, they are located also Chechenian representatives who is not aware at all about nuclear and about threats which can bring for all the world. So this is situation, and I'm so worried about especially also Zaporizhzhia station staff.
Great, thank you. Our next question is, we know that Russian occupiers don't take necessary measures to keep Chernobyl safe, and they've done a lot of damage in the area and around. How many years do you think it will take to make everything better again after the war?
I can't say how many years. To manage everything from 1986, it takes 35 years. But it's everything now in step back, big step back, and especially in funding, because all international society and donors use billions of dollars to provide technical help for Ukraine to manage exclusion zone. So right now, it is not just question about the time, it's also question about the budget. So I have no answer for this, sorry.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned that due to the fires, a radioactive cloud could spread over Europe. What could be the health and environmental consequences of this radiation reaching Western European countries?
Exclusion zone is really big territory, and in some part, I show it in the map that we have red forest. Red forest is forest very dangerous when it's firing, and it is depends which territory will fire and which condition of weather will be in that time. But in any case, the red forest fires and the spreads of radiation from red forest, it's very dangerous, especially also for Europe, for Belarus, and for Russia as well. It will be depends of condition weather, about maybe raining or wind power, wherever, but it can bring bad consequences for all the Europe as well.
Thank you. And you mentioned that firefighters are unable to fight this fire right now. What do they need to safely battle these blazes in this region?
First of all, we need unmilitarization of this territory. We need to move all military from this territory that our firefighters can come in. Second of all, we have no infrastructure how to come there. They destroy all bridges, they destroyed roads, how machinery can come, and we have no diesel inside of exclusion zone because they stole it and they used all diesel which we actually had inside an exclusion zone. So it's many problems before we can start a fight against fire.
I know that diesel fuel is required for the backup generators in the exclusion zone in the event of a power outage. If there's no diesel fuel and the power goes out, what does that mean?
Now, nuclear power plant, Chernobyl nuclear power plant is connecting to 350 power line, and actually is electricity exists in Chernobyl nuclear power plant. But other facilities without electricity, what it's very dangerous because we have no monitoring on this facility, and we have no camera working. We don't know what is going on there with all these facilities. But if we talk about the help in case of broken this line, its diesel generator can work as far as diesel exists inside, and as far as diesel generator can work, but no one can provide the total amount of hours how diesel generator can work, how long time it can work. But I don't think it can, any diesel generator, we have good ones, of course, inside in Chernobyl nuclear power plant, but I don't know, 2-3 days maybe. Last time when it was not, when we had this accident that electricity supply was shut down, diesel generator will work for 4 days.
Thank you. In the event of an accidental nuclear explosion or radiation, which countries would suffer the most from failed crops in Ukraine?
It can actually whole continent. Can't say which country. It's, you know, Zaporizhzhia station, the biggest atomic station in Europe, with capacity of 6,000 megawatt. It is in case of explosion. We have all nuclear power units is full with nuclear fuel. So the material inside nuclear fuel is really special danger in case of emergency and in case of some explosion. So of course it is neighbor countries, it is Romania, it is Poland, it is Hungary, and yeah, if we talk about Belarus. If we talk about Chernobyl, Belarus, it is the most closest country which is have big consequences if something happen in exclusion zone.
And is that referring to just agricultural crops, or is that also referring to the areas of total catastrophe in the event of a nuclear power?
In Ukraine, for example, really serious now problem with agricultural crops because a lot of fields with during the occupation or some military activity with Russian. Russian put the means there, and it's very dangerous work in this territory. If we talk about pollution and some radiation which can make some impact to agriculture right now, I don't think that these threats exist right now. We all know that level of radiation is increased, but not across the border of level which is danger for humans. So right now, I don't think it's can happen something with the agricultural sphere in countries which is located nearby Ukraine.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is, in your opinion, how difficult will it be to establish life in Ukraine after the war, to rebuild cities, transport links, factories, etc.?
I hope maybe my colleague Nikolai can comment and answer this question.
No, of course, it's a big problem because we don't know yet when it's officially this war will end, because some of the Ukrainians political experts that said we can finish this war, you know, in nearly future, in few next months. But in my opinion, it will be a little bit more longer time. But by the official Ministry of Infrastructure and the transformation that we received, that we already lost Ukrainian infrastructure for $500 billion. It will be so difficult, you know, to rebuild, you know, our infrastructure. But just for example, the Russians, they destroyed every house in Mariupol city. It's a crazy. In like they just mentioned in one city, which was the population was about 263,000 people. But now we, of course, some, like, for example, Greek prime minister said that the war will finish it. They will invest to rebuild the economy, like this from 10 billion or $10 million, sorry. But it's a big issue because everybody's on the world, because after the world officially will finish, we need to have a lot of money to develop, you know, to rebuild the country. But the Ukrainians, they can do this by themselves, but we are hopefully we was waiting for official support by the NATO countries, by European Union countries. But for the first day of the war, we received just, you know, some of these countries was, you know, just put the sanctions against Russia. Just remind you that we have more than 8,000 sanctions against Russia now from the all of European countries and the all democratic countries put against this country. But it will be big problem for everyone, and some investors for them will be important, you know, to invest money in our country. But I hopefully that we will rebuild Ukraine when war is finished. But most important, you know, to think not about the peace, but when we won against Russia, it's most important. Yeah.
Thank you. Our next question is, how will fighting in and around Chernobyl be conducted? Is this the first time in history that there is or will be fighting in radioactive zones?
I have information that it's not just fighting around. The military and soldiers, Russian soldiers, they were really not following the rules of which we have when people stay inside of exclusion zone. Especially they provide and they make some lines inside of ground, inside in the ground. They build some lines by hands in territory where is red forest. So this whole activity, we also have some information that some soldiers which is kidnapped by, catched by our military, they really have big consequences from activity from exclusion zone, because they make something inside an exclusion zone which is contaminate their bodies, and they are really in bad conditions right now. So all these military things inside or outside of exclusion zone, it's first in history, because it's never been that military and war catch nuclear power plants and occupied territory, which is really very dangerous. And I want one more time remind that first time in our lives and life of all world, we have state of nuclear terrorists. So this is the answer for first time this or not. This is first time what has happened in all the world.
Really troubling. Thank you. Our next question is, what is the probability that other countries do not recognize some Russian territories? Sorry, what is the probability that other countries do not recognize some Russian territories will open other fronts in the war?
Nikolai, maybe you help with this question.
No, of course. I mean, like some of the countries don't recognize this Russia. Like, if I'm not wrong, if I'm not mistaken, the entrance to Ukraine, and like these doing this operation, and they started to war against Ukraine. The most of these countries which is on the world, like the Russians or some allies. Just for example, I would like to remind you, when it was the United Nations, they voted for what's in Russia did, like in 2nd of March, it was official procedure of United Nations. Just 5 countries was supported by Russian government. I mean, like it's North Korea, Belarus, Eritrea, Syria, and Russia. It's now we can understand just the level of how the Russia developed with their diplomacy. That's a big problem. What's doing Russian government they did in Ukraine, that they tried, to invite some volunteers from Syria or from Libya, to fight against our country. Even though it's some of these like terrorists, so the members of the specific military operation from the Russia side, it was some volunteers from the other countries like in Africa. But the level of negotiations of every piece, every democratic world, everybody's expected and understand that Russia, they staying by themselves. Even like some allies like the China and some of the other countries, they stayed like on the middle, but most they hopefully they would like to to cooperate with, for example, with European Union or with United States when in Russia. They tried to do like some specific cooperation, but between those countries, which is like it lasts for Russia. They cooperate, for example, with Ossetia, with Abkhazia, but every democratic world, nobody's expected, nobody accepted this kind of diplomatic stuff or diplomatic work which provided by this government. It's a lot of fully of fakes. It's absolutely untrue. But thank you for our friends from Anonymous. They help us, to show from all the democratic world what is going on with Russia. They hacked all of these federation websites and showed these documents, how they doing in our country. All of this from the first step, from the first day when Russia entered Ukraine. First, they provide and they just public all of the fake news. They tried, to fight with us like in hybrid style with informational attacks. But I think everybody's understand what they're doing wrong. But I hope that they will finish in the near future. It's new era. It's a it's a new generation of Ukrainians. But we will see what will be in 15 or 20 years. But I'm proud for Ukrainian families, for Ukrainians who defend the countries, of members of Ukrainian territorial defense, of the military joint forces, and also I'm thankfully for Ukrainians, for volunteers like the who legionnaires who helped the Ukrainian army, who entered to Ukraine to fight for democracy against Russia. Thank you for them.
Our next question is, and you may have already answered this, after so many years, can we accept the idea that the occupied territories are a part of Russia?
Of course not. Ukraine will be, all of the Ukrainian territory will keep in the independence in also the Crimea and may be recognizable by the Russians. It's a part of Ukraine. And also no one's from Ukraine, never will recognize it. I'm just predicted that Donetsk and Lugansk, it's an independent territory. It's even the part of Ukraine.
Thank you. And what about the idea of Ukraine accepting neutrality to end the war? Is that an acceptable solution?
I think this solution should be very strict negotiation, and strict lines should be on this treaty. And today we received some information that Great Britain can support the neutrality of Ukraine. I'm so happy, and I do believe that they really can support. But we should not have one more Budapest MOU. So a lot of questions about neutrality, but I think it can have possibility. But it had possibility. The 7th of February, I wrote the article about neutrality. But it was before the war, before they destroy our cities and kill so many Ukrainians. Now, I don't know. It is something what it should be pointed and put it on the hand of our national vote. Ukraine should decide, not just government and politician, should be pointed inside of Ukraine and voting by all our members.
You brought up the Budapest Agreement. In your opinion, do you think that the United States should have done more to protect Ukraine for giving up their nuclear weapons? Or was it clear that there was not a framework in place?
We cannot go back in 1994.
I think I just want to answer the first question about neutrality of Ukraine. It's kind of this position was proposed by Russian side during this treatment talks yesterday in Istanbul. But hopefully, in my opinion, we lost the opportunity to be a real NATO member in 2005, 2006, because I remember this visit of George Bush to Ukraine. It was a lot of negotiations, to be the Ukraine to propose to be the real member of North Atlantic Treaty NATO member. But now I just quoted by what the Ukrainian President Zelensky said. Then how it's NATO it's also the remarks for General Secretary Jens Stoltenberg, because how it's possible to invite the Ukraine to be a NATO member with closed door. It's everybody, someone try to enter it, but you invite them, but you all the time, you have your key and you close this door. It's like I even can explain for my little baby when she's like 3 or 4 years old, it's impossible, when you knocked and you say, come in, but if you at the same time, you close everything, it's impossible. Because NATO organizations are all the time mentioning Washington Agreement in 1999, that's written in some of the articles within the territory, they have some problem with territory, all the time the war problem, they cannot be the real member of NATO. But it's true, at all the time, in my opinion, also it was last 3 months of NATO, it was talks before, because in my opinion, Jens Stoltenberg, he just finalizing his contract with NATO. Now he had a new proposal to be the chief of National Bank of Norway, and also we know who is in Norway. It's like more liberal country. It's true, but in my I was in a Munich Security Conference 1 month ago, and we received some information from couloir talks on inside information. The new General Secretary of NATO can be the Daria Grybauskaitė, former president of Lithuania, of Kalle Kaljulaid, the former president of Estonia. For us, it's so good because if some Baltic countries, so the former politicians of Baltic country can be the new general secretary of NATO, it will be more important for us. But also due to extraordinary summit last week, we don't receive any powerful information and any important information for Ukraine to fight against the Russians. But also in last Friday, it was so important visit of President of USA to Poland. It was some important statement was given by Joe Biden in Warsaw. Now, even if you mentioned in the Budapest memorandum, it's also they didn't do as well. They can do more. I mean, by American government to support Ukraine.
Bram, thank you so much to both of you for coming on and sharing such critical issues about the situation in Ukraine. Dr. Durbak, do you have any other pressing questions?
Yes. Well, first, I would like to thank both of you for a very clear, precise presentation of the ramifications of this war and of Russian attack on Ukraine. I also would like to ask each one of you, what can be done by, for example, by us in clearly explaining the issues to the public? And is there something that we can do in order to bring attention to the situations? Because media is really one-sided or the other-sided. And it is very, very important to present precise, clear focus and not opinions. Kateryna, I will start with you.
First of all, it's very important to update all data and information every day and have connection, of course, with Ukrainian expertise and share this information as you do by webinars, by Twitter, by internet. It's very important. Also, it's very important to publish articles and to have conversation with international partners. For example, from my point of view and from my perspective, I try to attend every day as much as I can in all webinars on online meetings with international partners and share the reality. And the most important, to call the things by the names. So if we have the state nuclear terrorists, then we should consider it and we should say it. Not just Russian problem in Ukraine. No, Ukraine have no problem. We have problem with our neighbor. And they have problem with their brain, I think. This is Putin especially is sick, and everybody knows this. And it's very important to provide sharing the information with all international society and all international partners.
Thank you, Kateryna. I think you're absolutely right. You need explicit terminology, and that terminology has to be repeated many times so that people can understand what we're talking about. Mr. Volkivskyi?
And also, thank you to showing all the world it's more important questions like through the webinars for world information transfer. What I'm doing, like what I did last 1 month, I had a lot of interviews or like the comments for some articles. Now I'm trying to focus to publish the articles of these countries which like on the middle or neutral or some the government of these countries didn't do a good job to show what is real going on in Ukraine. I tried to publish the comments in for example in Brazil or in Mexico, in these countries from whole world, to show that even Latin America what is going on in Ukraine, even for Africa region, because some of European citizens, they understand what's going on. They accept, they prove. Just 4 countries, what what they do in last month by the government. It's like, for example, Germany, France, Hungary, and Italy. Because Italy now, they just think, oh, it's more important. We're not fighting against the Russia, because Maria Ovsyannikova is now, for example, next week I will invited to show just one Ukrainian who will attend the Delphi Economic Forum next week. I'll try to to show the whole world on my panel discussion with colleagues what's going on in Ukraine. But now we need to fight, of course, with the way how we fight in Ukraine on the ground, but also it's most important what we can do now and here to fight against this disinformation and against this propaganda which produced by the Russia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Volkivskyi. Fake news, unfortunately, is often, it gets much more attention than reality. But again, thank you very much to both of you. And thank you, Jessica, for hosting. And I wish you a very peaceful future. Goodbye.